Well, hello again. My name's Adrian Gilbert, and once more I'd like to welcome you back to the Invisible College. Now, if you haven't been here before, I've been doing a long series of lectures on the Book of Revelation. I've taken a bit of a break from doing those for a couple of months. I felt I needed to regroup and think a bit more about what I wanted to say next. And I also had a lot of other work I needed to get on with. So I took a bit of a break. But we're coming back now, and this is the next one in the series, and we're on to chapter 16 now. And if you haven't seen the other lectures, I think there's around about 19 or 20 of them. I would advise you to do that, but you will still find that this lecture is a standalone. So, you can go on with this one and then go back and recap on the earlier ones. And my take on the Book of Revelation is very different from anything you'll see or have heard elsewhere. I'm not a Bible bashing preacher. That's not my mission at all. I'm actually quite a sort of new agey kind of guy. I've been involved in all sorts of research into all sorts of different areas. But what I am is I'm still basically a scientist at heart, and I look for evidence. And when I approach the Bible, I look at it as data to be analysed and pulled apart at times. I don't just take it on trust. Oh, it's all the Word of God, it's all written there, therefore you've got to believe it. I think that we have to be more critical than that. We have to look at this information. Yes, I'm a Christian and I believe in God, but I do think that we need to analyse the material that's presented to us and do our best to understand it, A, within the context of what went before, but also in the context of what we know from history and from our own researches into other areas. So that's been my approach, and it's kind of an intellectual rather than an emotional approach, you could say. And that's why you'll find that what I have to say is really rather different from what many other people present, but certainly on YouTube. There's many preachers there. I've seen some of them, and maybe what they say is true as well, but they come from a different perspective from myself. So anyway, let me bring you up to date. We've gone through the earlier parts of the book. St. John, the person who's writing it, he's had an out-of-body experience, and he's met a great cosmic being he calls the first and the last, who is obviously kind of a symbolic of Jesus Christ himself. And he's taken to heaven, and he's shown things there, and he's then shown all sorts of images to do with the end of days, the last times, which is kind of like he's elaborating on what was described in brief, almost hinted at in the book of Daniel. And I've done other lectures on the book of Daniel for what was going to happen in the last days. He's now taking this further forwards. He's being shown a series of images. He doesn't understand them at the time, and he's told he won't understand them, that they won't be understood until the time is right. But he's told to record everything accurately in a book, which must not be changed. Now, in the first part of what he's shown, he sees a book with 7 seals on it, and the 7 seals are opened one after another. And the Lamb, who is symbolic of Jesus himself, the Agnus Dei, opens these seals. He's the only one worthy to open them, and things happen and things are shown. And then after that, he comes to trumpet calls. There are 7 angels who blow trumpets, and they make announcements, and things happen, and things are brought into the world. And the last trumpet, I think this is the last lecture we did, brings about certain plagues, one of which I think might well be this COVID thing that we've been going through. But anyway, there are certain plagues that are announced are going to happen. Certain other things too. And then once they've done the 7 trumpets, they then do the 7 bowls of God's wrath. That God has made a winepress out. The squeezing of grapes is like the squeezing of blood of all the people who've sinned and done terrible things on this planet, and who are going to be punished now. And the 7 bowls of God's wrath are poured out by 7 angels. And that's what we're going to be dealing with today in chapter 16. And it's a pretty fruitful judgment, you could say, that we're in for some, let's say, strange, if not hard times ahead. So without more ado, let's press on with this and see where it takes us. So we're on chapter 16, the 7 bowls of wrath. Or wrath. So 7 angels pour out 7 bowls of the wrath of God. Yeah, we have that expression, don't we? The wrath of God. It's something you don't really want to encounter if you can avoid it. So bowl number 1, the first angel pours out his bowl on the earth. It causes harmful and painful sores on the people who bore the mark of the beast and worshipped its image. I should just say that we've discussed the beast, the 7-headed beast with 10 horns. It's a world empire or a world organization, a one world government is what's being described as the beast. And you'll see this in earlier lectures. And people are given a choice. They can either say, no, I'm not having anything to do with that beast, in which case they're going to find life has been difficult on earth for those who don't agree with it. Or they can say, yeah, take me on board, I'm with you, you know. And I see that the beast, the mark of the beast is really to do with putting money before everything else. I think you could summarize it that way. And the reason I say this is the mark of the beast, we're told, is 666. And people have been scratching their heads, you know, and saying, well, what's this 666? And they've been trying to analyze the number and see what it is, because you're supposed to have this mark on your hand or on your forehead. And they say, oh, it's going to be a microchip. You know, Bill Gates is going to put a microchip in all of us and we're going to be his slaves. Well, it's not quite like that. It's the number 666 you will find in the Bible elsewhere. And it's actually to do with or the symbolism is to do with King Solomon, who was this king of Israel, or king of Judah, I should say. Well, it was Israel as well at that time. And he, we're told, was able to get 666 talents of gold every year. That's kind of like his income. So he has other things he gets as well, but that 666 is measured out. And it symbolizes his greed for wealth. This is one of the things that corrupted Solomon. Solomon started out as a good king, but he's corrupted. And he's corrupted both by his sexual passions. He has 800 concubines and 200 wives. Yeah, how could you? But he also had this greed for wealth. So there's punishments, meted out on Israel, the state of Israel, because of this. And after his death, the kingdom is split in 2. So that's one connection that's to do with this this wrath. So the people who bore the mark of the beast are people in our own day who are similarly trying to rob the world. They're trying to make slaves of all the rest of us. They're so greedy for wealth that they're sort of pulling it all into this. It's like in Monopoly, you've played Monopoly, and you buy properties and you build houses and then you build hotels. You try to bankrupt everyone else, so you're the top dog. You're the one who owns everything. That's kind of this beastie thing. And those who don't go along with that, they have a difficult time because they can't buy and trade. And it's difficult for them, and we're going to live through 3.5 years of the rule of the beast. So I've talked about that in other lectures. I'm digressing here. because we've got things to do with the bowl itself. So it causes harmful, painful sores on the people who bore the mark of the beast and worshipped its image. So if you've been following the beast thing, you're going to get punished for it now. And you can see angel number 1 in the picture here. Let me just put that up there. He's pouring out his bowl of wrath on the people. And you can see the people gathered there and they got sores. Worshipping the beast and its image means living a life that is based on falsehood. This leads to all manner of diseases. Humans are intended to be connected to higher spiritual energies. Without these, our bodies become prone to many illnesses and die prematurely. Yes, I should have said that. This whole beast thing is connected with being out of balance. For example, instead of, if you're ill with something, the sensible thing to do when you're ill, something's out of balance in your body, you need to find out what's out of balance and put that right. Simply taking a pill that relieves you of the symptoms, that's not really curing it, is it? And it can lead to bigger problems later. So this is kind of what it's talking about, and it's the same to do with food. We're eating the wrong things, we're cooking them the wrong way. We need to stop buying factory-made food for a start. They take all the nutrients out of it, so we end up being nutrient deficient. And it might surprise you, but many people in the Western world eating a lot of food, but they still have vitamin deficiencies, especially beriberi, which is a vitamin B1 deficiency, and leads to sort of big pot belly. And we associate that with famine places, but it can happen here if you're not getting the B1 you need. So these are kind of the punishments that are coming on the people because they're living a life that's out of balance. Now, it's important to remember that the beast is not a person. It is a world-dominating authority run by an elite who are obsessed with money. This globalist elite believe that a government of their appointees is the only way to end wars and harmonize the world. This cannot, for obvious reasons, be a democratically elected government. So if you're going to have a one world government, you can't have everyone 7 billion, 8 billion maybe it is now, having to elect that government. They're not going to all agree, are they? So you're going to have to impose it. And they believe that they know better than everyone else, and they're going to impose their will. They're going to take control, and they're going to make everyone do as they're told. And that doesn't mean democracy. And that's actually, we're seeing this happening more and more in the Western world. Instead of democracy, there is to be ruled by atheistic technocrats. These administrators are unencumbered by the tedious business of having to win elections. They work as functionaries of the hidden world government. They make sure that big corporations are given control over most things, including food and medicines. Bad science leads to their tampering with genetic engineering and chemical interference of food. This leads to multiple illnesses, from heart disease to cancers. Thus, to stay well, we must try to get back to natural food and remedies. Well, I've already said all that, but I think you can see where I'm coming from on this, that whether we like it or not, there is a hidden world government. There are the super wealthy elite, and they're taking control of the world. Now, I said this to you just now. The six-pointed star, known as the Seal of Solomon, Khatem Suleiman, is a symbol of Judaism, but is also found in Islamic art. And here it is impressed on an Arabic coin. You'll actually find this symbol all over the world. You'll find it in India as well, and I think you'll find it in Greece, ancient Greek art. So it's not just a Jewish symbol, and I'm not putting the blame on the Jews or anything like that. I'm certainly not anti-Semitic. I'm actually very fond of Israel. So this is a symbol. The six-pointed star is the symbol of Solomon, and Solomon is this 666 number that connects with wealth. So I want you to see that connection. As discussed in the previous episode, the symbol of the beast is also the seal of Solomon. He received 666 talents of gold each year. Money as the means of exchanging goods and services is fine. Problems come when monopolists hoard it, or the powerful steal it in the form of taxes they don't pay. The elite government will be free to hoard or steal at will. Right, so that's kind of what's going on at the moment. And I think we can see this very clearly, what's happening in our world. Most of us are horrified. I'm certainly horrified when every time I look at the newspapers, something else horrifies me. And it also ties in with this crazy woke agenda that we see being presented everywhere, where, you know, as a man, I can just announce one day, well, actually, I'm not a man. I don't feel like I'm a man. I feel I'm a woman. And everyone said, okay, right, you know, Adrian's a woman now. Hooray, Adrian's a woman. Yeah? And I can go and compete in women's athletics. I can go and change in women's change. It's absolutely bonkers. And if you're any kind of sensible person, you can see that. But in order to stay on board the beast bandwagon and keep a job and keep getting income and so on, people normally say, yeah, okay, we go along with that. That's what they want. Yeah, we'll go along with it. Well, I'm sorry, you've got to stand up and be counted and say, when someone's telling you lies, when the emperor has no clothes, you have to stand up and say, I'm sorry, you're talking nonsense. Right. Those who support this venture have the mark of the beast. They will be punished in this first outpouring of God's wrath. So expect that if people carry on in the way they have been, that they're going to start suffering from all sorts of ills, and everything from AIDS to COVID, and everything else in between. Now the second angel pours its bowl into the sea. It becomes like blood, and all the living things in the sea die. Blood in the water symbolizes death. You know, you've heard this, the idea of the blood in the water, that the sharks can smell it from miles away. It symbolizes death or something dying. And this sounds like a mass extinction event, perhaps caused by the pollution of the seas by volcanoes or some such agency. And, you know, if all the fish are going to die, it means the seas are being poisoned by something. Oops. Many marine life forms are going to be wiped out. This is happening already through oceanic pollution and overfishing, and it's going to get worse. Right, so this is the first of the ecological warnings that we're given. You're seeing signs happening in the sea. You're seeing the fish dying. You're finding the fish stocks are disappearing, and people are battling over fish stocks. We're having this whole fish war here in England at the moment, between England and France. Since we've left the EU, United Kingdom, that's Great Britain and Northern Ireland, are no longer in the European Union, which means all our waters, our territorial waters agreed in international treaties, revert to being British, solely British, and not EU waters. We were sharing them with the whole EU. And that's caused outrage in France because they like fishing our waters, which are very plentiful in fish compared with their own. And it's causing huge outcry and problems. They're demanding fishing permits and so on. So we're going to get this more and more of this, people battling over resources and causing conflicts between nations. And it's happening already here in Britain. Now, the fossil record, now we're talking about extinction events, fossil record shows no fewer than 5 major episodes in Earth's history when mass extinctions occurred. So you find, I've put them with red lines here on this picture, and you can find there's one between the Ordovician and the Silurian epochs, and there's a sudden extinction, a whole load of fish or sea creatures died, and totally other ones appeared shortly afterwards. And then we had a second extinction between the Devonian and the Mississippian, And again, a lot of things died and other things grew up, and creatures started coming on land. We have an extinction 3 between the Permian and the Triassic. Some dinosaurs died out, other ones came about and appeared. Then we have from the Triassic to the Jurassic. Sorry, we've done that one. Triassic to the Jurassic, extinction 4. That's when you've got your brontosauruses in the Jurassic and your tyrannosaurs and all of that. And then there's another extinction which takes us into the Tertiary. There are certain big mammals then. And then we come into the Quaternary and we're into the epoch of humans. Now, during these mass extinctions, there was major changes in the flora and fauna. And each time one dies out, a whole load die out, maybe up to 90%, even more, die out of life forms. And totally new ones appear that don't have any connection. There's no intermediary evolutionary stages between what went before and what suddenly appears. And this is a big hole in the Darwinian argument of evolution, that gradual small changes with survival of the fittest taking out the ones that don't work. The big hole in that argument is, how do you get these dramatic changes? And we don't see any evidence for the intermediate stages between them. And the answer, of course, is that it's not done by evolution the way Darwin said. But that's a whole other subject. And I've done 3 lectures on the whole Darwinian thing. I call it a revolution and evolution. And I'm very critical of Darwin's theory, which I think is complete nonsense. Anyway, the fossil record shows no fewer than 5 major episodes in Earth's history when mass extinctions occurred. Darwinian theory has no explanation for these. They each seem to have happened over a very short period of time. Afterwards, new species appear that are radically different from what went before. However, there seem to be no transitional forms that link these to what went before. One group of organisms disappears while others take their place, seemingly coming out of nowhere. When we look at Earth's history through this lens, it looks as though the extinction events are needed to clear the canvas for the next stage. So I wanted to see that this is talking about mass extinction of oceanic life. This bowl is poured in, of God's wrath is poured into the sea and everything dies. That looks very much like a mass extinction event is going to be happening, but they don't happen for no reason. They happen because it's time for change and something better. So could it be that the apocalypse is describing another mass extinction? The apocalypse, the revelation, all of what's in this book, mass extinction. Are the disasters it foretells simply to clear the way for what comes next? It rather looks that way. We must prepare ourselves for this. So I want us to sort of stop looking at this. We look at these events, we know, oh my God, terrible things are going to happen, And if you are an atheist and you don't believe that you have a soul, that is an absolute disaster, isn't it? Anything that's going to terminate you or terminate, let's say, your family or your nation or the human race is a disaster on a cosmic scale. But if you do believe you have a soul and you believe that we're just inhabiting these bodies temporarily and that we have a higher destiny, then you can see it as being more like a pupating stage where the caterpillar forms a pupa and sloughs, and then it comes out of the pupa in a more advanced stage. Perhaps the caterpillar becomes a butterfly. We see that as the religious idea of the soul migrating and going to other places. So it becomes less of a catastrophe and more of a time of epoch-making change, but something to be expected. Now we come to bowl number 3. The third angel poured out his bowl into the rivers and the springs of water, and they became blood. And you can see number 3 there on the left, and he's pouring his bowl into the river there. And the angel says, "Just are you, O Holy One, who is and who was, for you brought these judgments. For they have shed the blood of saints and prophets, and you have given them blood to drink. It is what they deserve." So, giving them blood to drink suggests to me that it's talking about causing warfare and causing blood to be spilt. And of course, one of these rivers we're going to encounter a bit further on is the river Euphrates, the great river that in Abraham's promises, or God's promises to Abraham, was that he'd be given the land between the Nile and the Euphrates for his people. So that includes actually large chunks of Syria, the part we would call part of Paddan Aram. But the river Euphrates forms a kind of border, as it were, and it's a very important river. Certainly historically, there would be very little life in Iraq, particularly, without the Euphrates. So it's like the Nile in Africa. The Euphrates and the Tigris, the other river, are the important sources of life, really, in the whole region of Mesopotamia and Syria. So this harks back to the Nile being turned to blood at the time of Moses. Yes, turning the water into blood was one of the miracles that Moses performed, that to get Pharaoh to release the people. Perhaps also water turning to blood is a prophecy for wars over the water supply, with much blood being shed. Now, this is another crisis of our times, is that we have this world population increasing and water resources are not increasing with it. So we're going to be getting water wars, particularly in hot places where they don't get much rainfall, and they're totally dependent on rivers. And actually that's starting to happen in Africa. Up in Ethiopia, they have the sources of the Nile, and they've started building dams because they want to take more of that water to irrigate their own land. And the Egyptians in particular are furious because any diminishment of the Nile could affect their agriculture. And they're threatening Ethiopia now. There is tension building there, and also, of course, Sudan, which is downstream as well. So the whole situation with water, and it's also happening in Vietnam. The Chinese have been building huge dams on the big river there. I forget what it's called now. And that's diminishing the amount of water that's going to Vietnam and causing droughts there. And of course, Vietnam is a small country compared with China. I mean, they can't fight their great huge neighbour to the north, or certainly not on their own. But this whole control of water and controlling rivers is going to become a bigger and bigger thing in our times. Now, we move on to bowl number 4, and you can see him up in the top left-hand corner there. The fourth angel poured out his bowl on the sun, and it was allowed to scorch people with fire. They were scorched by the fierce heat, and they cursed the name of God who had power over these plagues. They did not repent and give him glory. Now, one of the things we've been talking about a lot in recent years is so-called climate change. Yes, a very emotive subject for a lot of people. I don't disagree that there is climate change. And if you look in the fossil record, you'll see there have been peaks and there have been troughs. We've had ice ages and we've had warm intervals. We're in a warm interval at the moment, but we know that back in the 17th century, they had something called the Maunder minimum of sunspots. No sunspots were appearing on the sun at that time. And the result of that was the temperature of the Earth went right down, and the River Thames froze over during the winter time. and people were able to skate on the ice. It was actually the climate in Europe changed quite considerably for a short period of time. I think about 50 years or something, maybe a little longer than that. And we know that there are ice ages in the past. We can't blame these on man-made carbon dioxide because there was no industry back in those times, not that we know of anyway. But what we do know is that the sun goes through certain cycles. There's the 11-year sunspot cycle, and the sunspots go to a minimum, and then you just a few near the equator, and then gradually they move up and up, up and up. What happens at the end of that 11 years is the magnetic field of the sun switches, and it starts a new sunspot cycle. So we know that the sun has these cycles, and we're now, through the research of people like my friend Dr. Don Scott, we're understanding that the sun actually runs on electricity. That's a whole other subject, the electric universe theory. And I want to do some lectures on that at some stage. But the idea that the electricity comes into the sun from outside and causes an arc, a plasma arc around it, what we call a corona. So the sun is much hotter on the outside than the inside. And the sunspots are actually symptoms of the arcing of the strength of the current coming into the sun. And when there's more sunspots around, the sun is stronger. The energy is more. There's more electricity going into it. And that affects our climate. And if the energy coming in changes for any reason, and we don't know what causes these things, it's to do with the Milky Way and the relationship of the sun to the Milky Way. Within this theory, the sun is not a nuclear bomb, right? We've been taught the wrong thing there. There's no evidence for that. It's just that in 1920s, the only source of energy they could think of that was strong enough that could light up the sun was nuclear energy. Before that, the Victorians thought that they worked out how many tons of coal must be burning on the sun every day, because what they knew about was coal furnaces. Now we begin to understand the sheer power of electricity, and that's what's going on. But that's a whole other subject, and I don't want to go into it. But the situation is that the people are burning up. The Earth is getting hotter, and that is what people are arguing about. And they're saying, well, it's down to carbon dioxide. But carbon dioxide is only 0.04%, 0.03 to 0.04% of the atmosphere. It's actually a very weak greenhouse gas, as they call it. And the influence of water vapor is much stronger. And you know that from your own experience, that if you go outside and it's a cloudy sky in the winter, it's going to be warmer because the clouds hold the heat in. Take away the clouds and you're going to have frost on the grass. We know this. Never mind carbon dioxide or any other gas. The heat is being radiated out much more strongly when there's no clouds around. And the clouds are what really affect our climate. And the amount of water vapor in the air is also affected by the temperature of the water in the oceans, and that's affected by sunlight. So the sun has a profound effect on our climate. It is the governor. And we need to realize that and wake up to it. And we don't have control. This is the thing. We have to realize that we are not in control of nature. Nature is in control of us. And be a bit humble about it. Right, so I've written here, it is the sun ultimately that maintains the climate of the earth. Like everything else in nature, it follows cycles. Global warming and cooling do happen, but they're not man-made. Ice ages and severe droughts are caused by the sun. Partly this is cyclical, but it also depends on energy flows of electricity driving the sun. So there you have it. The people are complaining. Well, aren't they just complaining about, oh, it's getting so hot, we need to stop driving cars and we need to go back to living in caves. 8 billion of us? You serious? you throw away our civilization and you're going to have starvation on a scale you cannot imagine. And that in turn will cause huge wars. And I mean huge. And we've got to be very careful what we do with our use of energy and our civilization. Because you cut that energy flow and you're going to cause major problems. And we've had a few petrol shortages in England this last couple of weeks. And that's caused a crisis. Well, imagine that. And there's no petrol at all. There's no supply of energy to pump the water. There's there's no energy to drive the tractors to plough the fields. We've got to be very careful what we do and what we think. Right. So I've written here, the energy flows, electricity driving sun. This is very advanced astrophysics and not taught in universities, who are wedded to old-fashioned theories and heresies, including the atomic bomb theory for the sun, which is nonsense. Right, bowl number 5. The fifth angel poured out its bowl onto the throne of the beast. Now you can see him doing that there, number 5. The throne of the beast is this canopied chair here on the right-hand side. And its kingdom was plunged into darkness. People gnawed their tongues in anguish and cursed the God of heaven for their pain and sores. They did not repent of their deeds. So this old beast thing, the elite and their globalist ambitions, that's going to be brought to naught. They're going to be plunged into darkness, no energy. There's several candidates for the throne of the beast. Yeah, let's look at the throne of the beast itself. Where is the throne of the beast? Right, first one, Pergamum in Turkey. Now, I say that because at the early chapters, I think it might be chapter 3, or I think it's chapter 3, it might be chapter 2, they, in the Revelation, he talks about Pergamum and first and last, the Jesus figure is sending a message to the 7 churches, and there's one of these churches at Pergamum, and he's saying, I know how hard you've had it. You're living there, and in the throne of the beast is there in Pergamum. So, is that the place that we need to be thinking about? Well, Pergamum is only an archaeological site, really, in Turkey these days. I don't think so. Somehow, I think it's symbolic of something else. So we need to look further for where the throne of the beast is. Berlin, where the altar of Pergamum now stands. Yes, there was actually an altar at Pergamum where actually they carried out sacrifices, human sacrifices of Christians on that pagan altar. And I think it was in the 18th century, the late 18th century, German archaeologists excavated this altar. It's actually a temple, and took it back to Germany. There's actually a museum in Berlin where they've re-erected it, and you can go there. You can go and see the altar of Pergamum, which many people say is the throne of the beast, the throne of Satan. Is it that? Is that what we're meant to be looking at? Well, again, I don't think so. Somehow, I mean, yes, I know Berlin's been a problem in history, in the 20th century anyway. But I don't think we can blame the poor old Germans just because they brought back the archaeological relics. Maybe they brought some things back with spirits or something with that, and maybe it's not a good idea to have that, but I don't think that's what we're talking about here. So 3 is Strasbourg, where the EU Parliament is modelled on the Tower of Babel, now stands. Yeah, well, we discussed that in an earlier lecture, how they actually built a Parliament building in Strasbourg, which is in France. France has the right to hold the Parliament in the early treaties of the European Economic Community, and they won't give it up, although the main Parliament these days is in Brussels. But the French are not going to give away what they've got in Strasbourg. So they have this stupid parade once a month. They pack everything up in Brussels and they drive down in all these Pantechnicons down to Strasbourg, unpack everything, have I think 3 days of meetings there, pack everything up again and back to Brussels. It costs millions of pounds, you know, to do this. Ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. But the Parliament building there was built to look like the Tower of Babel. You might think, well, why did they do that? Well, they think that they're putting right what went wrong at Babel. At Babel, the people were building this tower going to go to heaven, and God looked down and said, oh, well, we can't have that. They'll be up here and they'll be like us before too long. So he gave them all different languages and sent them out into the world. They couldn't understand each other because they all had these different languages. So the European Union is trying to undo that. They're saying, right, well, we'll come back, we'll bring our languages, and we've got translators. And we'll translate everything into everyone's language and we'll carry on the process. We got around that, we've beaten God. So is that throne of the beast? Well, again, I don't think so. I think there's a better candidate. And that better candidate, I'm afraid, my friends, is New York, which has the headquarters of the United Nations. Now, you might wonder why I'm saying that. And again, I've discussed this in earlier lectures, but we'll go through a little bit here. The United Nations is the nearest thing we have at present to a world government. Aha! We were talking about a one world government. And it has numerous sub-agencies with enormous power over all aspects of life. These include the World Bank, the World Health Organization. Well, you've heard a lot about that and what the World Health Organization has to say, and how the World Health Organization got us all locked up in our houses, you know, because of the virus. And the World Health Organization wouldn't blame the Chinese for starting this epidemic. So they've been in the news a lot. World Meteorological Organization, well, they're the ones that are pushing a lot of the climate change thing. International Court of Justice, right, well, they can overrule your own laws in your country if they contravene what they say are universal laws. And it's got many other things. So this has all the trappings of what is becoming a parliament, or not a parliament, but a government of all the nations. And that's what they're working towards and have been ever since it was the UN was founded. And in the basement of the UN building is a quiet room for the use of all faiths, which really means it's not Christian. And in the middle of it is a strange altar made from a very large block of magnetite. This goes down into the bedrock beneath the building. And you have to ask yourself, why have they got this strange altar in the basement of the UN? I mean, why? I can understand having a little meditation room, a quiet space, but it looks like it's something more than that. And the whole idea of it being connected to the earth, is that to connect to the grid system somehow? Are we talking ley lines here? Are we talking some kind of occult thing? Well, I don't know. We think about it, don't we? What is its purpose? Is it art, like the weird, non-denominational and confusing picture? There's a picture there, you can see it at the end of the room, which is specifically designed not to contain anybody's religious symbols that could upset anybody else. So you have this sort of confused, what would you call it, sort of Picasso, you know, what cubist, whatever you want to call it, type art. That's just speaks to me of confusion of the mind, actually. So that you go into your meditation space, your quiet room, and you're having your mind confused with imagery that doesn't give it focus. And then you've got this great big altar standing in front of you, demanding that you notice it. Very, very weird, in my opinion. So I think that we're talking about the UN as the throne of the beast. So looking at New York today, it looks increasingly likely that a bowl of wrath has already been poured on that city. So maybe it is, yes. Look at what's happening in New York. Suddenly it's gone crazy. I mean, the whole United States is going crazy. Let's be honest. I've never known it. Well, I don't think any of us have ever known it so polarized between left and right. But it's more than that, though. It's between people who have seemed to have lost all sense of reality. And I was saying about this whole gender thing. But it applies in all sorts of other areas too, stirring up racial troubles all the time. Just not behaving according to their own constitution. It is actually bizarre what's happening, and New York is really the epicenter of this. Very, very bad things happening there. The crime rate's gone through the roof. Their experience with the virus was very, very bad. People are running away from it in droves. This great city, the city of skyscrapers, and the envy of the world. In the 1950s, we in Britain looked across at New York and we were quite envious, I can tell you. This great throbbing metropolis when we were living on rations, bomb sites everywhere, and our industry crippled. We looked across the Atlantic and we thought those guys have got it right, but not anymore, I can tell you. I feel very sorry for New York and New Yorkers. Something problematic is happening there, and I think it's to do with this bowl of wrath that's being poured out. So, bowl number 6. And we can see him. Where's he gone? Bowl number 6. Angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up to prepare the way for the kings from the east. And I saw coming out of the mouth of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet, 3 unclean spirits like frogs, and you can see them down here at the bottom, coughing up or breathing out frogs. For they are demonic spirits, performing signs, who go abroad to the kings of the whole world to assemble them for battle on the great day of God the Almighty. That's the Battle of Armageddon. And they assemble them at the place called in Hebrew Armageddon. Now I'm going to do the next lecture. I'm going to do on this. I'm not going to discuss it here because it needs a whole lecture to itself. But I'm going to discuss what Armageddon is all about, Battle of Armageddon, and give you a clearer sense of that. But what we're seeing here is that the 3 frogs are demonic spirits, and they're going around stirring up trouble to cause a war. And preparatory to that, drying up the river Euphrates. And I see that as being very much connected with Syria, and we'll see that here. The river Euphrates, and I've got it as a blue line running down here, has its origins in Turkey. Now, I've seen it there in Turkey. I've been to the Ataturk Dam with the Turks. There are other ones building dams. They built a big dam called the Ataturk Dam on the Euphrates to water the fields of around Haran. You can see Haran there in Turkey. I've been there as well. And it's amazing. They're taking the water out of the Euphrates there and taking it and making the desert bloom. And nothing wrong in that, unless you're downstream. And Syrians are not so happy about that. From there it flows through Syria and into Iraq. And you can see it comes all the way down here. The shady part is Syria. And it comes down into Iraq. And it joins up with the river Tigris, and you can see that's the sort of white line running down here, and the two join together and enters into the Persian Gulf just to the east of Kuwait. You can see Kuwait down there at the bottom, just east of it. You see the blue line, and there's a white line. Actually, that white line is the border with Iran. I haven't marked in the Tigris, but it runs down there through Mosul and comes down through Baghdad and comes down. So the Tigris and Euphrates are the two great rivers of Mesopotamia. We've already had reference to 4 fallen angels who are bound at the Euphrates till the end times. That was in an earlier lecture in this series, the releasing of these angels, these demonic angels. And they gave rise to the second woe, which possibly refers to the collapse of Syria and persecution of Eastern Christians by ISIS. Remember the whole ISIS thing that was going on a couple of years ago? You see it on this blue line here, come down from Turkey a little bit, you see a place called Raqqa, R-A-Q-Q-A. Well, that was their capital of the ISIS caliphate, as they called it. And Deir el-Zur was also part of their territory, and they conquered bits of Iraq as well. So, well, you can see this grey area here is the ISIS territory. So they were on the Euphrates, and this drying up of the Euphrates, I think, is not so much the drying up of the water as a wreckage of the lands there, and of particularly of Syria, which has been wrecked by the warfare that these 3 frogs have brought these people from all these different places. They brought Americans there, they brought Russians there, they brought Turks, they brought Islamic fundamentalists. They brought all these people there to fight it out, and the result has been an absolute disaster for the country. It's dried it out. You know, probably quite literally, I should think the agriculture there has been wrecked completely. So these are prophecies which are happening in our own time, and this is all being done in preparation, we're told, for the great battle of Armageddon. Now we're told of 3 unclean spirits, like frogs, that are released into the area. We see that the USA, I'm sorry Americans, but this is true, the USA has made a humiliating retreat from the whole area. Iraq and Syria are broken. Euphrates has dried out. The stage is being set for Armageddon. So I'm sorry Americans, but you've been pulled into this as well. You probably didn't realize it, and I'm sure your intentions were very good, that you wanted to go there and help the Syrian people. But this is all part of a conspiracy that was above your level. It's being done by demons working for Satan. And they manipulated you into that situation. They also manipulated you into leaving all those arms behind. Yeah, this whole crazy retreat from Afghanistan, where you leave half your people there and then scurry out, tail between your legs, and you leave billions and billions of pounds of dollars worth of helicopters and advanced weapons and everything there to equip an advanced army. This is all part of the plan for the Armageddon. Yeah, you've now armed the Persians, particularly the Iranians. They're getting all this stuff, and you've armed their allies, and these arms are now going to be used against Israel in the Battle of Armageddon. You watch. So yeah, carrying on with this, and I saw coming out of the mouth of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet, the 3 unclean spirits like frogs. So what are these 3, the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet? Who are they, and what are these frogs? So what are they, these 3 frogs? They are false words, teachings that are corrupt and defiling for mankind. They've already destroyed Syria and Iraq. Symbolically, the Euphrates now runs dry. The way is prepared for Armageddon, the last war. And now, bear with me, and I'm sorry if this upsets you, but it has to be said. I believe the 3 frogs are 1. Communism, false doctrine, false teaching, which caused enormous suffering through the world ever since it was launched. And I have a book about Karl Marx and his love of Satanism. Did you know that? He was obsessed with the devil, He wrote plays about the devil. He wrote poems about the devil when he was a young man. And in himself, he was a disgusting individual who stank to high heaven. He would never bath. He was covered in boils, terrible bad breath, and he treated his wife abominably. 2 of his children committed suicide. The man was a monster, and yet the doctrine he left behind, Marxism, is now preached around the world as salvation of mankind. He was also an atheist, hated Christianity especially, but he would do if he's a Luciferian. But unfortunately, it's caused enormous trouble. Millions of people died in Russia during the period of communism. Millions of people died in China under Chairman Mao with his great leap forward and the revolution itself and the persecution of minorities still going on in China, the communist country. Persecution of the Uyghurs, for example, being murdered and their organs taken out for transplants. It's just absolutely disgusting. And everywhere that communism has spread, it's caused suffering and death. That's the first one of these frogs, these dirty frogs that have come out. And the second one is fundamental Islam, or Islamism as we call it. Yes, now I know there are very good people, Muslims, that they believe in God and they want to do their best for God. They do the best they can for their family. They live according to the highest standards. But there's a minority who look in that book, the Quran, and they find the bits that say, if you see a Jew hiding behind a tree, kill him. Yeah, that want to cut the heads off anyone who doesn't believe in their weird extremist doctrine. And we saw this in Syria, with all those poor guys lined up in their orange jumpsuits and having their heads cut off. It's absolutely shocking and disgusting. But I'm afraid that this is a plague which has been spread by a frog, a demonic spirit, taking over Islam and stirring up hatred against all of mankind. And if you look around the world, you'll find that wherever there's trouble, there's an Islamic element. I'm sorry, Muslims, but it's true. Go to Nigeria, you'll see it, and Boko Haram. You go to Libya, you'll find it, with various ISIS split-off groups there. Go to the Philippines, you'll find it. You'll find it in Indonesia. You'll find it everywhere. And even in Europe, yeah, with all the Charlie Hebdo people being murdered and people doing crazy, outrageous things in London, just wanting to kill people because they think that that's the way to go to heaven, and it's not. The way to go to heaven is through good works, through love your neighbour. It's not by killing people and hoping that you die in the process and therefore Allah loves you because you've done his fighting for him. Absolutely crazy, monstrous. That's the second demon. And the third demon is what I call globalism. And this is this outrageous capitalism, that greed and monstrous desire to take over the world, to make everyone else a small elite to run everything, and everyone else to be basically serfs, slaves, who can't earn their own money, their own income. They're not allowed to own anything. This whole stupid thing that we saw in that Davos thing where the guy was saying, you know, you'll have nothing, but you'll be happy. Oh yeah? Oh yeah? I'd rather own my own house. I'd rather own my own camera, my own car. Thank you very much. Okay, I don't really own anything because when I die, I leave this body behind, my spirit goes out. You can't take anything with you. And that applies to them too, by the way. Well, you know, they might think they're king of the world, you know, cock of the hoop, sitting on a big pile of dollars. I own everything. Ha! I'm winning at Monopoly. Yeah, well, you can't take it with you. I know you don't believe in God, but you're just going to find out once you die that yes, there is a spirit world, and yes, you are going to be judged, and you're going to be judged extremely harshly for what you've done to this world, and for the way you've treated people, and the way you've taken over everything, and the way you've made so many people unemployed and unemployable, and the way you've mixed up and you've destroyed so many countries with your avarice. That is going to be punished as well, and it's going to be punished hard. And so this is to do with the three frogs. It's all going to be punished, and it's going to be punished during this battle of Armageddon, which you are bringing about, whether you know it or not. So these three are unclean, i.e. sinful doctrines that have brought misery and destruction wherever they've taken root. All three are antichrist, which means against the teachings of Jesus Christ. And that's very important. Jesus Christ is the master, and he's coming back here. Believe me, he's coming back here. He's already here in spirit, and he's going to show himself before too long. We now see them manifesting together at the Euphrates in preparation for an attempted invasion of Israel. And this is what the Battle of Armageddon is really all about. The devil, you have to understand, Satan, hates Israel. He hates Israel with a passion. And not just the Jewish state. I have to remind you that the Jews, the Jewish state, is actually really only Judah, which was 2 tribes out of 12. The other 10 tribes are elsewhere. And we'll talk about that another time. But the devil hates Israel, and he hates Jesus Christ. He hates Christianity more than anything else, and wants to eradicate it from the world. He's not going to succeed, but this is his plan, and it's being executed as we speak here. And the destruction of Syria was part of that, and the clearing of the way, the drying up of the Euphrates, they call it. Well, it's not a literal drying up of the water. It's a drying up or clearing the way to allow crossing over from the east across the Euphrates in order to invade Israel. So we come to bowl number 7, which is the last one. And you see him up in the top right-hand corner there. And the 7th angel poured his bowl into the air, and a loud voice came out of the temple from the throne, saying, "It is done." And there were flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, and a great earthquake, such as there had never been since man was on the earth. So great was that earthquake. Well, we're familiar with earthquakes. We see them quite a lot. You know, there's been quite a few earthquakes in my lifetime, all over the place. We even have very small ones here in Britain. But they're so small they might just bring down the odd chimney pot somewhere. And we're not on a, well, at the moment we're not, or we think we're not, on an earthquake zone. But there are places in the world that are, and they have a lot of earthquakes in Iran, in Turkey, in Greece even, and even in Italy. And they have them other places too, of course. In America, South America, North America, they have earthquakes. Down in New Zealand, they had a big earthquake in Christchurch, if you remember, just not that long ago. So there are a lot of earthquakes, but this is going to be the biggest one that's ever been since there was man on the earth. That's what we're told. Well, there's something to worry about. And it's being done by throwing his bowl into the air. Isn't that odd that it's done through the air? And it carries on here. The great city was split into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell. And God remembered Babylon the Great, to make her drain the cup of the wine of the fury of his wrath. And every island flew away, and no mountain was found. And great hailstones, about 100 pounds each, fell from heaven on people. And they cursed God for the plague of the hail, because the plague was so severe. Well, I think the hail part is to do with throwing his bowl in the air. And it's caused, the way that you get hail is you get air that has a lot of water vapor in it, drawn upwards into cold areas, and it condenses to form, first of all, water droplets and then ice. And the ice, if it's done enough and it's kept floating round and round and round for long enough, they kind of agglomerate to make larger and larger hailstones. Let's talk here about £100. I mean, it's a massive block of ice that would come crash. If that fell on you, it would, well, you'd be killed instantly. Doesn't need to be that big to kill you if a hailstone of a reasonable weight falls on you. But hailstones like that are going to destroy buildings. You know, certainly house roofs would be shattered by them. Terrifying. So this is one aspect, but then at the same time we've got these massive earthquakes happening, we're told. So this is all being done, and he's going to punish the city of Babylon. What does it say here? The great city was split into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell, and God remembered Babylon the Great to make her drain the cup of the wine of the fury of his wrath. Now, in the earlier, one of the earlier lectures, we talked about the whore of Babylon. I think it was the last lecture actually, riding on the back of the red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and she has a cup in her hand, full of the uncleanness of her activities. So you say, well, he's going to punish Babylon for this. And I talked about the role of state prostitution in Babylon at the time of the Great Babylonian City, and how every woman in Babylon was required to go and sit by the Ishtar gate once in her life and sell herself to the first man who threw money into her lap, and she had to have sex with him. She had to act like a prostitute, and the money would then go to the temple of Ishtar. Shocking, absolutely shocking. This prostitution as a religion, as part of your religion. Instead of having nuns who have to live chastely all their lives, and then they might go to heaven and be God's wives, as it were, God's handmaidens. In Babylon, you've got to be a prostitute, part of your religion. I mean, that's disgusting, isn't it? But when you look around at Babylon today, it's not there. The city is just a ruins of what was there. Saddam Hussein rebuilt the Ishtar Gate and a few other little bits and pieces, but nobody lives there. Might be a few Bedouins or something living there, but it's not a city anymore. So why would God want to punish Babylon? It's already been punished. It's already gone. Babylonian civilization's gone. Babylonians are just a memory. So why would God want to punish Babylon? Well, Babylon, the name Babylon, is an image. It's a metaphor. And we've got to look at what Babylon is today. And there is a place that is Babylon today. And we'll come to that in a sec. So what is the fall of Babylon, and what is the great earthquake that brings this about? It hardly makes any sense to talk about the ancient city of Babylon. This was in ruins even in the days of St. John. That's the guy who's writing the Revelation. And it still is. Rather, it seems to be talking about the inheritor of Babylon's decadence. This Babylon behaves like a whore, corrupting and spreading decadence to the whole world. It could be many places, but the cap seems to best to fit Los Angeles, the home of the movie industry, and arguably the most decadent city on earth today. Furthermore, LA is on a major fault line and is overdue a major earthquake. Will the next one be so massive that it splits LA into 3 parts? And I should add here that besides being the headquarters of the movie industry and the woke culture, which it's spreading around the world, everything's being corrupted and made woke. You might not like me saying that if you like woke yourself, but the whole thing about Hollywood is it's a huge propaganda machine besides everything else, and it can spread good or bad values. And in its early days, it used to spread good values. Good always triumphed over evil. All those cowboy films that I used to watch as a boy, good guys wore white hats, the bad guys had the black hats. You knew who was who. The bad guys would be sorted out by the end of the movie, and the good guys would win, and the Lone Ranger or Hopalong Cassidy or whoever it was would ride out, done a good job there, sorted out the place and made it good, helped the citizens to overcome evil, the evil that was spreading among them. Yeah, it was always the good would win. Now it's not like that, is it, anymore? Often the bad guys win. Bad guys spread corruption, and they show images in these movies which are themselves extremely corrupting. Yeah, they're near pornography. I don't know how they get away with many of the movies that they do show and the TV series. Take Game of Thrones, for example. I mean, I've never seen such pornographic decadence in a regular TV show in my life as what it was in that. And that spread all over the world, and its most popular series ever. Of course it was. People are tempted. They're tempted to look at decadence, and their eyeballs are pulled to it. But it's even worse than that. Hollywood is also the headquarters of the pornography industry itself. And this tidal wave of porn on the internet, which is corrupting especially young men and boys, is coming from Hollywood, and it's being spread out through the world through the internet, and it's corrupting people's appreciation of sex. It's corrupting the possibility of these young men forming decent relationships with girls and women of their own age, because they've seen so much of this vile, extremist, corrupt imagery coming from Hollywood that an ordinary girl, the girl next door, she's not like that. She just wants to be loved. She just wants to have a normal relationship. And if it works well to get married and have children, have a family, that's what she wants. And yet he's been showing these awful images of porn. And porne is the Greek for prostitute. Pornography, pictures of prostitutes. So they're being immersed into this prostitution atmosphere, and it's corrupting the whole earth. So I think LA and Hollywood is Babylon, and it's often called Babylon. They've got the palm trees and so on, like Babylon used to have, and etc. It's the most corrupt city on earth, and it's going to be punished. But other cities will be punished as well. I'm not saying that everybody else is good and they're bad, but this is the epicenter of it. So symbolic Babylon could be many places, but the cap seems best to fit Los Angeles. It is not only the home of the movie industry, but also the movie porn industry. The pornography studios churn out corrupting images of the most disgusting nature and put them on the internet. Thus the whole world is treated to the wine from the cup of this decadent daughter of Babylon. This is much worse than simply operating brothels. Yeah, it's bad enough if you're operating a brothel, if you're the madame and you're using these poor girls who need the money. Perhaps they've got problems of their own, or maybe they're taking drugs or whatever, and you're taking money off clients with these girls. But this is being done on a planetary-wide scale, and it's disgraceful. Furthermore, LA is on a major fault line and is overdue a major earthquake. So will the next one be so massive it splits LA into 3 parts? Yeah, think about that if you live in LA. If you're not involved in the porn industry and you're not an atheist and you're not sort of profiteering, I would get the hell out of there. So what about the islands fleeing away? Well, Los Angeles, and indeed the coastline of California from San Diego up to Santa Cruz and beyond, is not actually on the San Andreas Fault. You can see the line there. It's in red. So you can go all the way up. They've marked it at the bottom there, Brawley. So you're going all the way up here on the line, and it comes up to San Francisco. So on this coast, you can go up to Santa Cruz and you're not on the line. All the way up from San Diego, the bottom there of California. However, there are subsidiary faults that could open up too. in a really big earthquake, all of Western California would be shaken up. Well, this is going to be the biggest earthquake ever. So I think anyone in that area is going to experience this, and you need to be on your guard. It might also cause the whole of California west of the San Andreas Fault itself to separate as one or more islands. And might these islands flee away from the mainland? Well, this is what I think it might be saying. That you're going to see this whole area crack off and move away. Now, I know that you're going to say to me that San Andreas Fault is moving like that. It's not a sort of pulling apart thing. Maybe it will be. Maybe it's going to change. Things happen fast when they want to. And I think this is what we're talking about here, that the Babylon is now, the daughter of Babylon is certainly Hollywood and LA in general. And that's what's going to experience this punishment of this in particular. Of course, this is hypothetical, but assuming Babylon is a figurative term for LA, it would fit the scenario. The result would be devastation, and very likely such earth changes would be felt worldwide and not just in the US. There could be major earthquakes and volcanic eruptions elsewhere too. In fact, I would think almost certainly if you're going to have a big thing happening there, it's going to be ricocheting around the world. We're all going to be shaken up. It's not going to be just California that gets it. But I think LA in particular, because of the corruption of this whore of Babylon spreading her corruption around the world, I think that's going to merit special punishment. So that's the end of this lecture. I don't know that I say I hope you enjoyed it, because it's not very enjoyable. But I hope it illuminated a bit and maybe shows a good interpretation of this chapter 16. And I don't doubt other people have got other interpretations. This is only my interpretation. But I think it fits. And if the cap fits, wear it. It's what my father used to say. And next, I'm going to do the next lecture will be on the Battle of Armageddon, which has been just mentioned in passing there. And we're going to talk a bit more about that. Because I think actually further on in the Revelation, I think someone has edited that script and put it in the wrong place. It should have been nearer to this, and it's going to happen quite soon. I'm quite sure of it. So I might do another lecture on one of my other subjects before that, but anyway, I hope you found this interesting. And before I go, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please do. We need all the subscribers that we can get. We're just over 700 now. I need to get to 1,000 before YouTube take any notice. And also, I'd like it if you like to join the college, you can do that as a patron. Go to patreon.com and look up my name, Adrian G. Gilbert, and you can find out how you can join the college. It only costs £5 a month. It's not a lot, just a couple of cups of coffee or a pint of beer in this country. And I think you'll find it worth it. And also you'll be helping this work along. And I've got a lot of plans for how I want this to go forwards. Just doing lectures on YouTube is great, and I'm enjoying it, and I'm doing my best for you here. But I have other plans that we need to get people to learn more about many different subjects. And I can't do it all on my own. So please come and join the college, and at the very least you can become an associate, which is free. And all you have to do for that is send an email to admin.invisiblecollege@protonmail.com. I'll say that again. admin.invisiblecollege@protonmail.com. If you do that, I'll put you on the list. You'll get on the mailing list, and you'll be kept abreast of what's going on to get the occasional newsletter. You won't get, there's going to be videos I'm making only for members, people who actually join the college through Patreon. They'll be getting, they've already started getting, videos which are for them alone and won't be released to the general YouTube public, at least not immediately. I might release some later on, but the focus there is going to be for the people who are actually supporting the college, and they deserve to have something special for themselves. So thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to speaking again. Take care.